Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Jewish Divorce Project. I'm your host, Noam Rauscher.
And I'm your host, Leeron Tal.
Join us as we kvetch
and kvel about Judaism and divorce from our perspective as two Jewish professionals and two divorce coaches.
and two Jewish parents with lots of experience and plenty of opinions. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Jewish Divorce Project. It's good to be here with you. Did you know that not only am I trying really hard to sit in the right place so that the microphone picks me up well and that I'm not dodging it, but that the camera also sees me and I feel like human origami that I've just been squeezed into this tight place. But also, did you know that this is more importantly, I should say, our season finale?
Oh, yeah.
It's our season finale. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know what season this is. I've always had difficulty tracking it. So you can look on Podbean and it's
my
either
first
5 or
one.
6. We're marking this, right? LT, Leeron Tal.
Season.
Right? Season finale. So yeah, you're right. It's Leeron's first season. So, but this is our season finale and it's wonderful to be here. We're going to have a great conversation later coming up with Kate Anthony, author of The D Word. And we're going to tell you a little bit more about that later on in our conversation. But welcome back, Leeron. How was Hanukkah for you? It's finally over.
Oh, I felt like the longest Hanukkah ever. I mean, I love Hanukkah, but 8 nights is
It's a
overkill.
long time, really, when you
It's a
think
little
about
bit
it.
of an overkill. Yeah, and then I hosted a Hanukkah party, and I did it on the 9th night.
I know. I noticed.
Because I wanted to have it on a Friday night when no
actually
one
like
had to
it.
go to work the next day.
I thought
was
the title of
cool.
it, the After Hanukkah Party.
Yeah,
I
it was
thought that
after
a great
party.
idea.
Yeah, it was good.
It was a good vibe too. It was a good
Oh,
group of people. It was really nice to
awesome.
see that this is a community of yours that have stuck through like your kids growing up together, and now you're still celebrating Hanukkah. It's really lovely.
And I love it that
Yeah.
so many of the friends that come every year are not
Sure.
Jewish families at all.
Oh,
But
really?
a lot of them, and they're the ones that reach out and they're like, "You're having your party, right?" Like
Uh,
this is their opportunity to celebrate Hanukkah,
oh,
and
I
they're
didn't
so
know
excited
that.
about it.
Oh, that's really lovely.
So
It's
yeah,
become like a Passover thing now, where you invite the non-Jews.
yes, it's our tradition.
That's really cool. I didn't
Yeah.
know that. Well, I gotta say, I think that makes even more sense as to why you were pumping such like Hanukkah laden music throughout the party, all the parodies and everything. And I was like, I can't. I apologize.
You've heard them all.
I said it to your friends, like, there's not enough bourbon here in the world to make all this music
There
tolerable.
was a lot of bourbon.
It was a lot of bourbon, but it still didn't help. It didn't help at all. No,
I'm
it
into
didn't.
all the cheesy Hanukkah
Yep.
parody songs.
Yeah, you are. Yep.
But that morning, it was the day of my party too. The planning wasn't so great, but I had my monthly coffee and coaching that morning, which
Oh,
was really
lovely.
nice too.
Oh, good.
So that was great. Got to meet some new women that I've been working with just online. So
Yeah.
that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? How was your weekend?
It was good. Every weekend is a slow march to the bar mitzvah. I talked about the suit buying process last time. My son is really looking forward to it. He got some pictures of himself just kind of trying the suit on and seeing about all the pieces put together, and he loves it. He feels so incredibly proud of himself that I can't but sheb nachas, as they say, right? I feel like a overflowing water fountain of love and emotion, and sometimes it's tough. I mean, there's actually a lot of anxiety there. Like I feel for him. I worry about him. That's really what it is, and like how it's going to go on the day of.
Mm-hmm.
And then admittedly, and I ran into a colleague today and I was just chit-chatting with her and the subject of his bar mitzvah came up and she said, "How are you doing on the inside?" And I was like, I don't know if I look it, but like I'm a mess. It's just thinking about the day and being so proud of him and having my family there and reaching that milestone in such a surreal way. Like you don't even know how you got there to an extent. And my friend said something really nice to me. She says, like, you also have to remember that this isn't a reflection of you, right? And I said, "You mean as like a parent?" She said, "Also as a rabbi," and she's right.
Yeah, this isn't about
Like,
you.
it's right. My kid is my kid. They're their own person, and he's going to do amazingly. And the only thing it's going to be is a reflection of him, right? And
100%.
it really is his bar mitzvah. And that way, that hearing that said really gave full articulation to a way that I've been trying to feel about it, like in trying to kind of let go of some of this stuff. It's difficult because you don't always see it coming and you're not prepared for it.
Mhm.
And that was really helpful. And of course, it came from a female colleague, just being able to talk about like the nervousness of things and, the emotional connection
Not
between
being
us.
able to control everything
Absolutely,
as a
as well.
parent.
Yeah.
Sounds like you could use some good self-care right now, which Kate talks a lot about in her book.
Oh my God, I need to
The
go to the
spiritual
Cairo.
self, not everything,
Yeah.
spiritual, mental,
Yeah.
emotional. You need some good self-care, I think,
At the very least, I
because
need to
that's
go
all
to
you
the
can
Cairo
control.
and get a massage.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad we have Kate here to talk about those things, particularly while you're going through divorce, which is not an easy thing. In her book, The D Word, Kate touches on so many different aspects of what goes on in women's lives, particularly leading up to divorce and the difficult decision-making process leading up to it, and then also what they wrestle with in the process of going through the whole divorce. There's a lot to think about, and Kate sheds wonderful light on that and creates a great space, I think, for women in that
Hmm.
process too. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I can relate to so much of everything that she talks
Right.
about, not only in her book and her podcast. Uh, it's interesting for me to hear your perspective
Sure.
as a man, because I really do relate to everything.
It must be tough to
Yeah,
initiate divorce. I think
it
the statistic is, and
is.
I think, and Kate will correct me, hopefully, that 70% of all divorces are initiated by women. Do you fall into that statistic?
Yeah, for sure. I think that in my situation, I wish I had this book. I wish I had this information
Right.
before,
Right.
and after, right after. But yeah, I don't think people realize that making the decision is so grueling. Having those, I mean, it took me about 4 years of ignoring that inner voice, that inner critic, right? That voice that was telling me something's not right, and actually making that decision is really hard,
Very hard.
especially if you're not on the same page.
We're going to hear a little bit more about that in our deep and extensive conversation with Kate after this wonderful commercial.
Matzo ball is the nation's #1 holiday party and has been for over 37 years. They throw holiday parties on Christmas Eve for Jewish singles in cities all over the country in New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Boca Raton, Boston, and Washington, D.C. For information on tickets, check them out at matzahball.org. All right, welcome back. So I get to introduce Kate. Kate Anthony is the author of The D Word, Making the Ultimate Decision About Your Marriage. She's the host of the critically acclaimed and New York Times recommended podcast, the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, which I've been listening to for a long time, and the creator of the groundbreaking online coaching program, Should I Stay or Should I Go?, which helps women make the most difficult decision of their lives using coaching tools, relationship, education, geeky neuroscience, community support, and deep self work. Kate is certified as a domestic violence advocate, a co parenting specialist, and a high conflict divorce coach. Kate, we're so happy you're here. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys for having me.
Welcome,
Thank you
welcome.
so much. I want to go to the matzo ball.
We're going. You gonna come with us? Come on.
I would love to, except that my Jewish side did not win out, and so I have to celebrate Christmas. And also I'm having major surgery
Oh
on
no.
on the 21st. So I
Um,
can't go to the matzo
well,
ball.
we'll represent. We'll let you know how it goes.
I'm gonna dust off
But
my
maybe next year.
Well, they do
maybe.
have other
Yeah.
events, other fun events. Well, like I said, I wish I had your book before. I not because I think we would not
Right.
split up, not
Right.
because I think it would change the script,
Oh
but it
no.
would
Sure.
it would just have made it so much less painful, I think. So,
L-
first of all,
I
I want to
mean,
say Mazel Tov. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much. I mean, that's why I wrote it. I wrote it because I spent years agonizing over this. And, I've heard from, I think my friend Susan said that the research, I don't know who does research like this, but basically the average is that we agonize over this like 4
Oh,
years.
that's
Yep, I
interesting.
heard that too.
Yeah, I thought it was two, but
Like
four. Yeah, okay.
years, it could be, I don't know.
Right,
Um, but I mean, at the end of the day, right, it's years.
right.
We are really struggling with this. Um, and so I really wanted to make it a little easier.
Mm.
It's like it's not easy. It's never easy, but if you can sort of, I really wrote this book so that women
Mhm.
in particular can like recognize themselves in the stories that I tell, really so that they can sort of fast track the process, right? So we don't have to agonize so much or feel so alone.
Mm.
Like when you're in it and you've never been through it before, it's all you like, it's all new,
Mm.
right? It's all new to you. But from my perspective, I've heard thousands of stories over the last, decade plus. Um, and I see themes. I see themes that recur through all of these. And so I tried to put all of those themes in one place so that women could go, oh, that's a thing.
Right.
Oh, it has a name. Oh, I'm not crazy.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that's so interesting is I mean, I remember in my situation, I would get together with my friends and a lot of women would just like complain about their husbands. He doesn't do
Right.
this, he doesn't do that, he's not here, he's not there. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess all husbands suck. Like, I guess it's not that bad,
The
you know?
normalization certainly helps, and I'm also curious, like how much of that is typical
Mhm.
complaining that we all do about our
Yeah,
spouses
but
versus like a reflection of the quality of the marriage.
yes. And so you kind of, you tap into that in the book when it's kind of like, oh, it's fine, it's not that bad.
Right.
It's not as bad. Everyone else has it bad, or
Right.
that kind of.
Right. Right. Well, and I also really dive into like the cultural aspects of it because like if it's just marriage, right? Like if it's just marriage overall, then I guess, if I don't have it that bad, then whatever. I may as well stay. Because if the next person I marry is going to be exactly the same story,
Right.
just because of the way we do marriage in Western culture, all right, I guess this is it. To my mind, I so far have opted out of it entirely because if that's the way it
Yeah.
is, I don't I would rather not be in it, right? And until we really shift a lot in terms of how we do marriage in Western culture, um, there are a lot of people, like something like 65% of divorced women say that they'll never get married again. Because ultimately,
hmm
marriage benefits, I mean, overall, generally speaking, and I'm sure I would love to hear your perspective on this, Noam, but that marriage benefits men and it
Yep.
benefits men
Yep.
on the backs of our labor,
Yep.
right? And
hmm
so we're tired, we're exhausted. And then we sort of realize when we get out that, like, oh, I actually, when I'm as a divorced woman, right? My son was 3 when I got divorced. He's 18 now. But he was 3 and I was doing 100, you're 100% on 50% of the time. That was great.
Yeah.
Like I was so much less tired because I was 100% on 50% of the time. And when I was off, it was like nothing else was on me.
Oh, the perks,
Nothing.
the perks of
Yeah.
divorce.
Yeah. The
I
vacation
just didn't
mode.
have to take, well, I just didn't have to, yeah, right, exactly. Well, there's
No,
that, but
that's
like
what
I
I
didn't have to
labeled it,
take
right?
care of
That's what I ended up
him.
learning, right?
But I also didn't have to take care of my husband,
Right.
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So I felt like I had 2 toddlers in many respects. Again, no shade to men. This is just my experience
I hear
and a
you.
lot of women's experiences, right? I felt like I had 2 toddlers. And so, and I had a dying dog and 2 dying cats. And it was like, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go away and take care of me. Good. And the
Yeah.
one actual toddler. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because it's like you feel like I always say I didn't feel like I had much of a co-parent when we were
Right.
married,
Right.
and then all of a
Right.
sudden now he has to be a co-parent and has to
That's
learn how to
right.
do that, and you have.
Yep.
But that's where I think women benefit from divorce more so. Men may
Yeah,
benefit from marriage
that's
more,
right.
but I do
Well,
think
Possibly.
as
women
long
really
Yeah.
as
can benefit from divorce
Yep.
in
as
that
long
sense.
as we get good at saying, I know you've never done this before,
Mm.
and I know it's always been my job. You're a really smart person. I'm sure you'll figure out how to do it. And then let go.
Right. Right.
Right? Because
That's
what
hard to
tends to
do.
happen, oh yeah, because we want to get in there. We're like, all right, fine, I'll get the present, I'll wrap it up, I'll drop it on your doorstep, blah, blah, blah. We're like, right? Don't do
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Because here's the thing, most like we have to give people the dignity of growing. I mean, when
hmm
I got divorced, my husband didn't know how to do a lot of things. And I just sort of said, honey, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're really smart. I'm sure you'll figure it out. And I gave him the dignity of figuring it out, and he did. And then some of those things he became better at than I was, to
Mm-hmm.
be honest.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I mean, that learning
Yeah.
gap that you're talking about is huge and it's real. Many of
Right.
the male clients that I end up coaching, right, one of the biggest gaps we end up talking about is how you end up caring for the kid, right, and dealing with the emotional, right, and the domestic labor that is in your household as a single dad at this point in your life. And you're coming to grips with the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you realize that your ex did a lot of this stuff, and you now have to make up for that gap and that deficit yourself. And I'm sure, right, that is part of how men are benefiting in their marriages because of the patriarchal way that marriages have been set up and the way that women typically feel that they have to contribute to their marriages in that way and caring for their husbands. Eve Rodsky talks a lot
Yes.
about this. I sound like a broken record talking about her on this podcast. People listening are thinking, is this a divorce podcast or Eve Rodsky's podcast? But my point is to say Eve Rodsky should also come on the show. Let
Yeah.
me just say that. But
You've plugged enough.
we're focused on Kate here, Kate Anthony, and her book, The D
That's
Word.
all right.
Um,
Listen, I think a lot of her work is great.
well, but
I
to her
mean,
point of like
we
the division of domestic labor, right, is something that affects the quality of marriages, right, and the experience between men and women is very different in that way. I'm
yeah.
also curious to know, and I appreciate your sensitivities. I am curious to know about the general male experience in marriage, right, and how they feel it is for them emotionally, and if they're getting everything out of it that they really want, and also how their careers play into that as well. Because I don't think you can talk about marriage in this country, patriarchal system or not, without also talking about what's demanded of men as a distraction from their relationships, and that's the office,
Mm.
right, and how that can
Hmm.
also be a
Hmm.
very isolating and soul crushing experience for the individual man, and how that ends up coming back to the marriage, right? So if we're going to talk about a patriarchal system hurting people, right, I think we have to talk about hurting the entire marriage as an institution, and not just women, but like men as well, as saying like it's impacting all of us. And I don't think that
Mm.
dismisses the
Oh,
female experience, but I think it enhances it for us, knowing why the quality of our marriages are
yeah.
so poor, why so many
Yes.
marriages end in divorce, right? And how maybe
Yeah.
the modern workplace can also shift to make it a little bit easier for marriages in that way,
Yeah, well,
whether it's better pay or better
Well,
time off for
I
new
mean,
parents, whatever it
yeah,
is.
I
But
mean,
like, there's a
listen,
lot.
I say I think in my book, and I talk all the time about the fact that the patriarchy is terrible for men as well as women.
Right.
Like it's
That's exactly
terrible
right.
for women, but oh my, it's not good for
No,
anybody.
no,
Men, the amount of pressure that men have,
right.
they die at the younger ages than we do because of the amount of stress that they're under, the amount of emotional processing that they have to bypass because it's not
Yep.
culturally acceptable for them to like have all these feelings
Right.
and express them in the ways that we do. It's terrible for
That's
men,
exactly right.
terrible, and terrible for marriages.
Right.
mhm.
Yeah,
So
100%.
how do you think what do you see when it comes to non-heterosexual relationships as
Oh,
we're talking about
oh,
this? Because we're talking very
Yeah,
specifically about men and
sure.
women.
Yeah. Good question.
sure. Well, listen, like none of us gets out of living in the patriarchy.
Right. Right.
Like
It's
none of
true.
us.
It's true.
And so it impacts homosexual relationships in different
Mm.
ways and possibly not the same ways that it does heterosexual relationships. But I've worked with a number of lesbians in my practice who have very similar dynamics.
There's always like someone
Um,
takes this role and someone takes that role, and you don't share the
yeah,
labor, and
right.
this one's working in that. I mean,
That's right.
it's the same.
Yeah, it's a division of gender stereotype roles,
Hmm.
right? And roles are roles. They're not attached to a person necessarily, right? But so we fall into these roles, and the roles are really, I think, defined by patriarchy. And so we learn these things. We have grown up primarily in a heterosexual, those of us who are Gen X, right? Like we've kind of grown up in a primarily heterosexual culture, and it's
Yeah.
shifting like now. It's amazing. And it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in the next, 30, 50 years. But most of us who are adults at this point were raised in a predominantly heterosexual culture. That doesn't mean that everyone was heterosexual, but it was certainly harder to be gay. It was harder to be out. So there's a lot more suppression. And so, the relationships that were modeled to us were this dynamic, this patriarchal thing. So I don't think any of us, gets out of this without that impact.
You talk about impact, and that was one of the things that you addressed in your book, particularly through your concern for the children's experience in divorce. And so if you're like me, right, you feel things deeply emotionally, right? And then you're also Jewish and neurotic about things. And so like you worry about like
You're not like a typical man.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And I often
compliment.
realize this is why I don't fit in a lot of places and why I don't really, I just have certain difficulties. But my point is to say, like, more so than the average man. But
you're in tune with your feelings.
Thank you. I'm in touch with myself.
Yes.
I'm in tune with my feelings. So I worry about my children's experience. You addressed that as well. Am I screwing up my kids? And what's inherently also tied to that is the guilt one feels in making the decision to have a divorce or to go through a divorce. And they inherently ask themselves the bridge question, which is, should I stay in the marriage for the sake of my kids? Which I also think is somewhat generational.
Yeah,
like I think our mothers and our grandmothers' generation would have shied away from the stigma. Right. And also for financial reasons as well, because they were really dependent, talk about the patriarchal influence and grip, right? But they were really financially dependent on their husbands.
That's
so
right.
Divorcing was a real foolish idea in that way. But also like think about how it's going to damage the kids is a real emotional guilt-ridden thing that you kind of have to get over. You do a great job at citing the research about how kids are okay and about how the best thing that you can really hope for is to prioritize the kids' needs and their well-being. And that's how you end up making it a relatively meaningful and positive experience for them, which is how they grow up to be healthy. The question I have is you seem to offer an either or scenario, which is to say either you have a healthy marriage, right, that produces healthy children, or you have an amicable divorce, which also produces healthy children. And I wonder, A, if there's something in the shade of gray of like, do you need to have an amicable divorce in order to have healthy children? But why is divorce the only alternative to having a happy marriage? And let me just back up
or
a second.
Happy or a healthy relationship.
What does happy and healthy look like as well?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like, does open marriage come in that way? I asked a lot of questions and that's my fault. I apologize.
No. I think you did. So I want to make sure I understand I think
I feel bad
right?
putting that burden on you. So let me actually backtrack.
No.
I think she got it.
Fine. Done.
I think I got it.
Sorry.
I think what a healthy relationship is what is defined by the two people in the relationship.
Right.
So if there is a relationship in which there's an agreement that, look, I have a really close friend. I don't condone this remotely. I think I talk about it in the book. I can't remember, but I don't condone this in any way, shape, or form, but I understand it. I have a really close friend. She and her husband have not had sex in 10 years. And she was like cresting up to menopause, right? And when that happens, we really want to have a lot of sex. It's like our bodies are screaming like, this is it. This is it, folks. Last time to make babies. And like, we are like, we feel our sexuality and sensuality slipping away, right? I'm just saying it
makes
happens.
Sense.
Right. And she went to her husband numerous times and she was like, I have these needs. Like, I think we need to address this, whatever. And then they would go out and she would walk and she bought new lingerie and she would dress up and she would say, she would walk in the room and he'd be like, oh, you look nice. And then like they'd go out to dinner and she's like, she felt so barren and alone sexually. This man was her best friend. There was literally no one else she wanted to ride off into the sunset with.
Yeah.
But this was something that like, and she had an affair. Again, don't condone it. But she did have an affair. And I think it saved her marriage. She thinks it saved her marriage. Right. It allowed her to like now, this was not something that was communicated. This was not something that was agreed upon. If he ever found out, he would be devastated. And I think it did save her marriage. Right. And so this is sort of like, Dan Savage has a similar,
awesome,
love him. Feeling on this, right? That like, but again, like if an open marriage is something that is discussed, like a healthy marriage is something that works for both people. If nobody else understands it and it's outside the bounds of cultural acceptability or understanding, who cares? Right? If
Right.
it works for the
Yes.
two of you, then it
Yes.
works for the two of you.
Yeah.
I
Completely
wish and
agree.
I hope, because I'm seeing more and more of this, more and more of couples that are opening up where it's like, we're really
Uh-huh.
good parents together, we're really good partners. That's the hard part. I mean, I didn't have a partner
Yes.
in the parenting and then
Me neither.
the business of doing a family, right?
Right.
That was where I wished I had a partner.
Right.
But like, if you have that down and you're good at that and you're friends and you have that respect and communication, but you're romantically and emotionally not, you need to break up,
Yeah.
like you're not into it anymore. I just wish that, I think a lot of people are starting to understand that, but it's still like
Yes.
socially not acceptable. You can't be seen with this, you can't be seen with someone other than your wife out in public or, and
The things
I
that you would
wonder
do to
how
enhance that. Yeah.
yeah, I wonder
Right.
how that's going to change because if you
Yeah.
like
Well,
the attitude you have
do you
of
know
like,
what?
if we're okay with it, who cares what people think? But it is hard to,
It's hard to cross
Sure.
that threshold.
But
There-
you know what's
yeah.
It's
even
hard to cross that
better?
threshold.
But you know what's even better is that like if you have teenage kids right now, they get it more
They
than
probably
anyone.
get
They
it.
do. Right.
They're
That's
just
probably a good point.
that's how they are.
Right.
You know, they're
Naturally
so much more
polyamorous.
fluid. Yeah, they're
Right.
so much more fluid than we are and accepting, and they're not jealous and oh, all right, live your best life. You want to do that? Okay, cool. Like, but they talk about it.
And that
Everything's on
equals
the
happy
table.
Well,
kids.
and
That
it's also
right there is one of
Right.
the recipes we're talking about for happy.
Yeah.
For that's not, you're saying is a divorce or this or that. Like
Right.
you can, I think there is a way to do it. It's about
Right.
how you parent together, and that's the important part. What goes on in your romantic
right.
relationship? I mean, you want to model a healthy
but,
relationship to your kids, but
these are I love all these suggestions and I'm all for it, but I think realistically speaking, and there's the public threshold that you got to get past and being able to say fuck it, right? Like I don't care what other people think. It's also about, can you in your head and your soul also really reconcile this, and can you separate out that in many cases sex is just sex, right? It is a vehicle to the greater intimacy which you're trying to preserve, which is the friendship, right? We keep coming back to this, that really at the root of every marriage should be a deep and abiding friendship, right? That's what you keep coming
That's
back
right.
to,
partnership.
right? And the sex is the thing that helps that move that vehicle along in certain ways. I keep thinking about Marriage Story. Did you see that? They end up having
Yeah.
this big argument, and she and Scarlett Johansson's character says you had sex with her, and Adam Driver's character says you shouldn't be upset that I had sex with her. You should be upset that I had a laugh with her. Right? In the sense that
Yeah.
like what are we really talking about? What is intimacy of a relationship, right? And what's
That's
the
right.
the real priority? And if you can recognize that and feel confident in the intimacy that you have, then being able to have an open marriage in some ways really shouldn't be that much of a hurdle, right? Particularly if it preserves the marriage, right? And it brings you happiness and
Right.
brings joy to everyone else. It's a small price to
Right.
pay in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because I hear what you're saying, right? And I just know, like, for me personally, and this is where it's like the communication in, like, everything that we're talking about is
Yeah.
in how we communicate,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And how well we know each other and how well we know ourselves. Because for me, I am someone who was raised, I'm Gen X, I'm 53. Like I was raised, like I can't, like I was raised in like,
Yeah.
I was not raised in monogamy, by the way, but I was raised by divorced parents, and my dad was like, playa. So and maybe that's why, like I'm a serial monogamous, well, not even serial anymore. Like I'm a monogamous. Like I want that.
Yeah.
And to me, sex is an expression of love. And so for me, I don't think I could be in an open relationship. Like, I don't know, maybe at 53, I could completely
Right.
change my tune if I met the right person. I don't think so. But
I actually
but it
ask
depends
myself
on
that
the
question all the time, right? On the dating scene, right? Is open marriage something that I would be willing to consider? And as far as as far as I can tell, I would need to feel really intimately and emotionally secure and confident in that relationship,
yeah.
in order to open it up sexually, right? That's where I would need to be, and I don't know if I necessarily would need to be an even like opportunity for that, but I would need to feel really secure in that way.
Well,
yeah.
And I don't know what that reveals
We've gone
about
on a-
myself now. If there are any
we've gone on to a
therapists listening, my point is to say, like, Yeah, okay, it is a little bit of a
No, I
tangent,
mean,
but
I
if we're
feel the
talking
same
about
way.
Yeah.
staying away from divorce,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's part of the subject.
Well, she has a whole
Yeah.
section on
Right.
not your fucking job,
Right.
which I think is, you know,
Great title
and
for a section.
is great. But it's really, I love this part about the research that's talking about the 4 heterosexual population groups. And I think
I
it's
mean,
fascinating when you talk about happiness. You say that in the between married women, married men, single women, and single men, the happiest population group is married men, and then the next
Mhm.
happy is single women, then single
Mhm.
men, then the least happy is population group. And I do have to say, I mean, I'm much happier single than I was married.
Yeah.
And
And it says a
I can
lot
see
about
that. I mean, I think it's, yeah.
it says a lot about marriage as an institution when you've got the happiest population group is married men and the least happy is married women.
And yeah. And yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Mhm.
So, when women are thinking about this, they agonize over 4 years, right? They're going through this whole kind of emotional thing internally, and they're, like the ducks, right? They're cool and calm and collected on the top, and they're paddling right underneath the surface, really in crazy ways. What is
Right.
the first step? What kind of first steps does any woman need to take when they're really ready to make this decision about divorce?
The first thing they need to do is to stop looking at the other person and examining and what he's doing and how is he doing it. Isn't he? And he's not doing the dishes and he's not doing this, blah, 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 blah. Right? Like put that aside for a second and reconnect with self, capital S self. Because first of all, women, mothers, as mothers, we lose ourselves. Like we have no idea who we are anymore. We've had our, body parts torn apart and, and our hearts are now walking as humans outside of ourselves. Like it's a whole thing. And so we have to like really figure out who we are. And when you've been focusing on somebody else and what they're doing or not doing, and are they meeting my needs or do I have unreasonable needs and blah, 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 you're sort of outwardly focused. And so I want to start with connecting back to self, that inner voice. Like, okay, what do you know? Like, what do you know? Women's intuition is an incredibly powerful thing. There are entire institutions and systems designed around, squashing it. So it's got to be real powerful. We need to connect with it. We need to figure out, like, you know what? And if what you know is he is a great guy, he's just not my great guy. Okay, you're actually allowed to choose that. You're actually allowed to live a life with somebody that you're crazy about. You know, I also say, if you're not crazy about the person, if you think he's a great guy, but you're not in love with him, right? He deserves someone who's going to be in love with him. You're keeping him from experiencing that.
Mm.
But so we're going to, connect with all of those things. What are your values now? Like maybe as an adult, like I'd never done values work before, right? Like when I went to coaching school and we started doing values work and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I didn't know myself this way. Right now I'm naming things about myself that I just maybe intuitively knew or maybe changed, right? And when I can name these things about myself, I can then sort of like put them on the chessboard of my marriage and go, oh, that's interesting because I believe this is my value really strongly over here, but my husband's value is completely opposite. And that's okay, but that's a mismatch, right? And then you can start to name maybe where some of the mismatches are. And that's, look, there's no make wrong, there's no blame, there's no anything wrong with that. It's just, oh, this doesn't align. And you can just get sort of better clarity about those sorts of things.
Yeah.
By doing that work.
And it's almost like checking in. I think that when you first meet and you get married and maybe you're young, you feel like your values might be in the same place where you're like, we both want a family and we want to live here or there and this and that. But it's like, I do think women change so much when they have kids. We change so drastically. And yes, men definitely go through something when they become fathers, but I think there's just such a change where I think men sometimes are kind of like, where'd you go? What happened? What happened to my wife? She's a different person, and don't understand the change and the growth. And
Uh-huh.
you have to kind of check in and have that moment again of like, what's important to me now? You know,
You
and
know,
maybe it's not the same thing that was important to you when you first met.
Well, so this is a very interesting conversation, and there's a joke that I remember hearing early on in the divorce process, which said that apparently it's an old Jewish joke. I don't know that that's true, but when people get married, right, men expect that their wives are going to stay the same, right, and women expect that their husbands are going to change, and so I think that speaks to the point that you're just talking about, right? Maybe women go through that change at becoming a mother,
Yep.
and men don't experience the same type of change, and there's a real difference there.
Yeah.
It's a self. Well, it's
It,
because
it
all of a
might
sudden
be,
you're putting these.
it might be, but again, I would say that I think you both have your own equal experiences in the marriage, and that like you're both in your own worlds, and those have to really be honored. Right? I don't think I don't know that it's worse for any one particular person, especially if you look at the way that they are impacted by larger society and what
Yeah.
we expect of them.
Well, Kay, what
I
you were
think
talking about.
what's interesting.
Uh-oh, she froze.
Oh no, what I was saying was that it's interesting that what you were saying, Noam,
Yeah.
because I think one of the things is that women tend to use their nurturing, their caretaking, right? These are like our party tricks, and these are our relationship. We use it as bait to draw relationships to us, certainly when we're younger, right? I remember dating someone in my 20s, and I kid you not, I had a fantasy about getting him all new socks and like keeping them clean and folded in a sock drawer. That was a fantasy of mine. Like, right? Like that's our sort of relationship currency is this nurturing and caretaking.
Mm.
But then we have kids,
Mm.
right? We do that throughout the relationship. We get married and we nest
Mhm.
and we want to have dinner parties and we cook and we sort of do this whole thing, even if we're working, right? And then we have kids and we're like, okay, now let's get down to business. And I think to your point, men are like, what I thought like I bought into this other thing, and we're like, oh no, now I have like an actual kid, so now I need you to be a partner, and I'm done taking care of you.
I hear that
Oh my
loud.
God.
That's not
I
to say
hear.
men need us to take care of them, but there is like there. I mean,
I totally
correct
get
me
it.
if
No, I totally get that too, and I don't encourage any man to feel entitled to feel like his wife is supposed to take care of him. That's you didn't marry a mother, right? That's not what we're talking about. You married someone to be a partner. At the same time, any guy that's also become a partner is also need to confront his own inner drive in some way to be himself versus providing for his family. And there's no greater tension that a man feels at
yes.
needing to fit in at work so he doesn't lose his job and to have that stuff tempted in some way or threatened in some way is actually
Yeah.
a very difficult thing. So to think that guys aren't going through some type of evolution when they become a
no, they
parent,
are.
right, is inaccurate. They are. And they're
Sure.
going through it in
Right.
their
That
own ways as a provider and
pressure.
protector, right? Someone
Yes.
breaks into that house, who's getting up first to beat the
Yes.
shit out of the
Mhm.
criminal? Right, with the baseball bat. In the TV shows, if we're talking about some type of
Depends on the man, but yeah.
no, but hold on a second. If we're talking about stereotypical representations of people in pop
Yeah.
culture, right? The man is typically the one who gets up with a baseball bat or whatever he needs, right, to go defend the household. Now, that might seem a little comical, but let's talk about it in reality for a second. That means you're potentially putting your life on the line to protect your family. And we can joke about it all you want. Right. But if we're talking about division of labor, right, and gender roles and what people bring to the table, I totally agree that it's imbalanced and disproportionately laden on the women. No question about it. To discount a male experience as having to be a provider and protector as not also contributing to that partnership is misguided.
100%. I don't think we're discounting that
Right,
at
but
all.
right, but what I'm
Yeah.
saying is that like men go through that evolution as
Totally.
parents, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh,
it
no, not
impacts
at
the
all.
marriage.
Yeah.
Right.
I get it.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, I hear that. I hear that loud and clear. That
Right.
pressure. As soon as you become a father, I can imagine that it's like you get like,
Right. That's
like,
exactly right.
oh,
There's armor
Oh
that
my
goes
Shit's
God,
on.
real.
right?
Shit's
There's,
getting real.
there's armor that goes on when you become a father.
Yeah.
And not for
Sure.
your primary benefit
Well,
either.
So what Kate was saying, though, I think that women. And oh my God, I was just
Right.
so relating to everything you were saying. But I think that a lot of we enable it. We create some of these
Yes,
problems because
absolutely.
just like you said, I was
Absolutely.
like, oh, I have a house. I'm going to be a wifey. I'm going to make food for him. And then the baby's around and
Right.
I'm busy and I'm like, and he says, what's for dinner? I'm like, make your own dinner. Figure it out. Like you start to be like, he's a grown up. Like he can do his own things. But what happened to a year before the baby was born? You were doing it for him. You got him kind of used to that. And that was nice for everyone, right? And I was doing it with a smile and out of love.
Right.
And so that's our fault as women in a sense that we've created that
I do. I
expectation. We
think
create
it is.
we
Yeah.
create an expectation in men and then we just take it away and expect them
With no
to with
communication.
no
Right.
communication.
The assumption,
Yeah.
we know what
Yeah.
they say about that.
Yeah.
Right. The assumption that, oh, he's going to get on board and he's going to understand and he's going to, figure out that this switch has happened,
Right.
is not, assumptions never work in marriage anyway.
But at the
So
same
period.
time, as a woman, you can't be held back by their inability to make that adjustment, right? I can't tell you how many times I hear female friends who go through divorce and their husbands aren't catching up to speed, or their ex-husbands aren't catching up to speed, and they're making their lives a living hell because not only do they have to like parent the kids, but they still have to parent their ex-husband, and then needing to walk away from that guilt-free and saying like, gay gesund to hate, right? As my softie used to say, go in good health and do your job as a parent. And that takes a lot for a woman to have to do. And I mean, that can't be dismissed either.
Otherwise known as not your fucking job. Right. Like, first of all, if you're divorcing because you are sick and tired of doing the emotional labor and taking care of a tantruming toddler of a husband, for God's sake, don't do it while you're divorced.
Right.
Right. Like, do not emotionally caretake the person that you divorced because you're sick of emotionally caretaking them. Right. That's insane.
Yeah.
And that's not your fucking job, and by the way, the more you emotionally caretake someone, who doesn't, the more you keep them away from getting that are actually going to serve them
Right.
better, right? If you're playing someone's therapist all the time, they don't need a therapist.
You've got to create that space for them to actually show up in their own lives. And that's how you end up holding them accountable too.
That's right.
Kate,
That's
there were
right.
so many.
That's right. I mean, so when you set boundaries with other, yeah. Sorry, no, I was just gonna say, when you set boundaries with people, you actually open up their ability to grow and expand in many of the ways that you were filling for them.
Yeah. Well, you have a whole section on boundaries and setting your own boundaries, which is amazing. And there's so much more about your book that we'd love to get into. And there's just so much, and everybody just needs to get the book and read it. And I love that you have like actual exercises in there, parts to write in your own, thoughts and answers. It really is truly a guide, I believe, that can really help get started. And what do you think about? Is it beneficial for men to read this book as well?
I don't know. You tell me. No,
I think
yes?
so. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm getting
Absolutely.
a thumbs up.
Absolutely. I think the way
Yeah.
that Kate acknowledges what goes on in the home is crucial for men to be aware of. I think the practices that she recommends, particularly in self-care, is really helpful. It's just so that's got to be a primary practice for any guy. That's what I end up recommending 9 times out of 10.
I think men who are still married should read this book so that they do not get a
Absolutely.
divorce.
Well, and then also becoming aware of the division of emotional labor and
Yeah.
domestic labor in the household so that they can also bridge that gap. It's a useful book for anyone. Really is. Thank you for putting it together, Kate. Thank you for writing it.
Thank you so much. I mean, that means a lot, actually. Coming from a man and coming from you, it does mean a lot to hear you say that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Do you have any final words you want to share from the book? Something that we didn't cover, or
something that would make a really good audio clip.
No pressure.
No pressure. One of the things that I do talk about in the very beginning of the book, in the introduction of the book, is permission. I have a whole section called permission in the introduction, and I sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I do want to say, one of the things that's really difficult for women is this idea that we get to choose. We are so used to putting everyone's needs before our own. And so I just want women to know that they get to choose, that they get to live. We get to live happy lives. We don't have to this whole martyrdom sacrifice thing. It's bullshit. Like it just is. And we can be happy, and you deserve to be happy. And I will forever quote Mary Oliver, like, what will you do with this one wild and precious life? This is it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this life is too precious to spend in an unhappy and unhealthy relationship. Just is.
I think about women who are married 30, 40, 50 years and haven't experienced that true love and passion and sex. Like, man, you're missing out. How sad.
Yeah. You say that, but it takes a while to get there, right? You speak of like this really kind of like embodied,
or just, it does take a while.
Just getting rid of the toxic.
When I got out,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When I got out, like I've never had so much sex as when I first got out of. I mean, like, and now it's I don't, what year is it? It's a barren wasteland, but But it's a happier barren wasteland than the settling wasteland.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately the point too. I know for me, in thinking about relationships, is I really want to do it right. I really want to do it right the second time around.
That's right.
Yeah, and we learn so much from the first time. I think that men who have gone through divorce have a different level for respect, a different level of respect for mothers now, and maybe there's a little bit of this like, oh, I get from in both ways. There's as much as my ex didn't do things around the house, once he was gone, I was like, wait a minute, oh yeah, there was this and there was that. And like you have a little bit of that moment, and men go through it too.
Absolutely.
Big time.
Absolutely.
So I think if anything, it just makes you better the second time around.
Really does.
Or third or fourth or however many times it takes.
Now, come on.
However many times it takes someone, I don't know.
Kate, it was absolutely wonderful having you as a guest on this show. Thank you so much. Friends, don't forget to look out for Kate's book, The D Word. You can also find Kate on Instagram at The Divorce Survival Guide, on Facebook at Your Divorce Survival Guide, on TikTok at The Divorce Survival Guide, and her website, kateanthony.com.
Thank you so much for having us. Happy holidays, Kate.
Yeah, a little confusing, but thank you so much. You too.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll see you again soon.
Absolutely. That would be lovely.
We'd love it.
Take care.
If you're interested in becoming one of our sponsors or have questions and thoughts about the podcast, please email us at thejewishdivorceproject@gmail.com.
And you can always find us on social media at The Jewish Divorce Project on Facebook and Instagram.
And if you'd like to work with me, I specialize in divorce coaching for women. I can be found at mydivorceconcierge.com and on Facebook and Instagram at mydivorceconcierge.
And if you're interested in working with me for divorce coaching or spiritual coaching, I work with people of all kinds, of all backgrounds as well. My email address is noamrauscher@gmail.com. That's NOAMRAUCHER@gmail.com. And you can also find me on Facebook and on Instagram at Noam Rauscher.